The criminal element normally uses IT companies to spread this software and to infect more companies.
All right. Hello and welcome to the studio. It's time for us to have another interesting conversation. And there has been a lot in the news on issues of cybersecurity. There's been a lot of issues coming up here and there in the press. And we have Santho Mohapeloa. He is a senior underwriter specializing in cyber insurance. Now, he joined Allianz Global Corporate Specialty as a liability underwriter in 2019. He has an LLB from RAU, now the University of Johannesburg, and worked for SHA from 2009 to 2019. After completing his articles, he's had a really great run. Santho's expertise range from professional indemnity, cyber liability, digital distribution, commercial crime, and much, much more. I am so happy to have him on the line with us. Hello, Santho.
Hello, and good afternoon to your listeners.
Good afternoon to you too. So this issue of ransomware, especially in this part of the world, whenever you hear ransom, you think kidnapping, you think fear, you think anger, you ask why. And then, of course, you have to analyze the risks and, of course, be resilient in the kind of world we find ourselves in today. Thanks so much for joining us to talk about this. What exactly is the trend with this issue of ransomware right now?
The current issue with ransomware is that due to the COVID-19 remote working away strategy, companies have found that they are more vulnerable and more susceptible to ransomware attacks. In particular, we've had a lot of incidences concerning the shadow IT. The shadow IT concept is whereby when working remotely, you find that there's a criminal element that gives orders and instructions impersonating real members of your IT department. So ransomware has become a real problem as the cost of claims are sky high. And due to the fact that a combination high reward and low risk for cyber criminals, it means that the concept of ransomware is here to stay and is on the rise.
Now, it does feel like, unlike what the layman knows to be kidnapping, this is set up by large teams, set up by groups, gangs, people who are working in basically creating companies, set up to attack other companies. But is it as simple as that? Where are these attacks coming from?
The attacks are coming from highly specialized criminal groups in the first world, in Europe, Asia, and in America. The groups range from highly sophisticated groups to your normal average hacker. As a result of commercialization of ransomware as a service, we find that even low-level criminals have tools at their disposal to attack large entities and companies.
But do you feel like there's some backing that they must have had, financial backing from somewhere that isn't being discussed right now?
No, the financial backing is a fact. However, if you look at the services are being offered at very minimal cost, there's groups offering ransomware services at $40 a month. So there is that sets a problem for us, and the increasing factor of the use of cryptocurrency as it protects the identity of the attackers.
So what is basically making finance and financial transactions easier for more honest people is also creating a sort of closed circuit hub for people to take advantage of others. This makes sense, but then what was the trend before? Is this brand new or has this always existed?
Malware has always been a problem. However, due to the COVID-19 situation, the exploits and the vulnerabilities obviously are larger now. So ransomware has found itself as the highest threat vector at the moment. Like I reiterated, the commercialization of ransomware and ransomware management and ransomware tools has significantly increased the severity and the frequency of the claims.
Okay, so let's think about the small business owner now, who has, of course, created, a system within his company that is automated and relies on, the internet, relies on communicating with his customers and, of course, his internal staff. What sort of things does this SME owner need to put in place to create proper controls?
The SME firstly needs to conduct a needs analysis in terms of their ability and exploits. This can be done through or in conjunction with IT service provider or a ransomware service provider. After obviously assessing your vulnerabilities and your exposures, you can then implement your practices in terms of cyber risks. So these entail your multi-factor authentication, your regular patching. There's several factors that you can implement to improve your resiliency, and one of them that we find is really helpful is the actual training, the awareness programs in terms of your cyber-related risks, your training and awareness programs in respect of information security. This reduces the risk of loss as the human factor, a huge factor in your vulnerabilities and exposure.
Okay, so in terms of exposure, if, for instance, you're not using a company to, ensure your cybersecurity as a small business owner, what are the risks we need to look out for?
The risks that you need to look out for obviously depend on how dependent your business is on with digitization and how dependent is your risk on data processing. So the risks in terms of the ransomware, we advise as Allianz as a company that each individual entity to assess its own vulnerabilities and its exposures, while also providing advisory services in respect of best practices and clean hygiene in respect of cyber risks.
So, for instance, we've touched on SME owners, but there are a lot of larger companies who are, of course, at much higher risk, which happen to have become the targets, the major targets. For instance, supply chain owners and, regulators have had a challenge trying to put some regulations in place that don't restrict company owners while they're trying to protect them. So there have been quite a lot of discussions online on some proactive measures. Could you talk to us about some of the strategies that the regulators are putting in place?
The regulators are imposing penalties and fines for non-compliance of the handling of your data and the managing of your data. What we've seen is that as a company, there's been an increase on service attacks via IT companies. The criminal element normally uses IT companies to spread this software and to infect more companies. And there's also an increase in the actual supply chain attacks as we've seen worldwide. Previously, we were of the view that only large corporates are susceptible. But however, the attacks range from your SME to your large corporates. The attacks are indiscriminate, even though sometimes they can be specifically targeting certain companies. However, they do look at the lower hanging fruit. Sometimes use a machine gun approach where they attack all industries.
When you say all industries, it does feel like one of those Hollywood movies where there's some kind of terror attack. If, for instance, these gangs, groups, whatever we're calling them right now, have been able to potentially shut down some supply chain owners for, hours, days at a time, what's stopping them from, going further and getting into healthcare systems, transportation, etc.?
There is nothing stopping them. As you've seen in recent times, there's been attacks in the financial services sector, in the service delivery sector. So there's actually nothing stopping them. What they're doing is looking at vulnerable exploits. So they're looking at companies and entities that are not ready in terms of cyber resiliency and do not have a good deal or do not have a good cyber posture. So the attacks vary from all industries and size and type of companies.
Okay. So we've heard this term before many, many times, not negotiating with terrorists. We hear this in movies. We hear it from them in the US all the time. But paying ransoms, the question is to pay or not to pay. What's your advice?
This is a highly contentious issue. We don't advise the payment of ransomware amounts. However, you'll find that there's big issues around the payment to the actual criminal groups. You'll find that sometimes you might, as a company or as an entity, you can be in contravention of certain as well. You find that you might contravention by just the mere payment of the actual ransom to a group, and that might have far-reaching implications on your business. So sometimes even after payment of the actual ransom, we find that the damage has already been done, and it becomes a question of whether is it beneficial to actually pay the ransom. The other point to consider is that if you employ and also develop your best practices and your hygiene and your best hygiene practices in terms of cyber risks, you find that you might not necessarily have to pay the actual ransom because you have your management controls and your security controls in place, so that in the event of an incident, you can just recover and carry on. So payment of a ransomware amount is at the moment is a highly contentious issue.
All right then. So yes, it's discouraged. That's the long-standing position all over the world. It's strongly discouraged. But then again, what about cooperation with law enforcement, internationally speaking? So for instance, the law enforcement strategies around the world have improved based on the environment. Are police, federal investigative services, are they putting things in place to actually help the people at this point?
Yes, the entire cyber community, including the authorities, are all contributing, and it's all hands on deck kind of approach. As we move on into the future, it is a new topic, and there are continuous new topics. So the involvement of authorities is definitely key. You will find that the payment of ransomware amounts through Bitcoin are quite problematic, as the services around tracing such payments in Bitcoin is quite expensive and quite exhausting. Yeah.
All right. So before we wrap up, could we give some best practices, some ideas that companies should consider adopting to adequately protect sensitive information of their companies?
Sensitive information, definitely. With regards to the security around information and so forth, there's certain factors to consider. There's your endpoint protection, your EPP, your EDR, your endpoint solutions. This is obviously to prevent unlawful access. The company needs to intensify their efforts around email, web, and office document security. Network segmentation is also important in reducing risk. Monitoring, patching, and vulnerability management policies. Constant review of these policies and updating of these policies reduces the risk of loss as well. When being involved in mergers and acquisitions, the entities involved really need to pay attention in respect of the due diligence of onboarding new entities or merging with entities, and the suitability of their IT and security systems. Anti-phishing exercises and awareness training program, like I said, are very important in reducing the risk. So companies need to intensify this initiative and have at least these simulated tests, at least biannually, to ensure that your staff and the people element is always covered. There's also the aspect of your business continuity plan, your incident response plan. This is very important to have them in place, and also to have the plans considering ransom exposures in both your continuity plans and your incident response plans.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. So now, not only do we have, to plan for, different risks in the building. That is, if you are an in-office company, since a lot of people are still working from home, you're also thinking about your online security, putting plans in place, putting protocols in place to make sure all your team are aware of what to do should they be attacked by one of these gangs. I have to appreciate you for taking our time to talk to us on this issue of ransomware and, of course, cyber security. It's one that we all hope never happens to us, but at least we know we have people like you to consult and hopefully get us out of it. Am I right?
Definitely, you are right. However, we need to just adopt the approach that we need to be ready for an incident, and it's not a question of if it happens, it's a question of when it happens. Are we duly prepared to react to the incident?
Wow, interesting. It's not about if, it is a when question. All right, thank you so much, Santho, for talking to us today, and we'll speak again soon.
Thank you for having me.
All right, then. Thank you so much for listening. And of course, you can reach out to us on Twitter. We're at Africa Biz Radio. Of course, we're also on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook at Africa Business Radio. Please reach out to us. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at TT the Dynamite. And can't wait to take your questions. And hopefully, we'll be able to respond to your comments and contributions as well. Have a great day.